Hi everyone, my name is Karen, this is my channel RatherBeReading, and today I'm bringing to you my marked as to read video for May. So if you are new to my channel, Marked as to read is a series of videos that I do each month where I just talk about all the books that I marked as to read on Goodreads for the past month, and I always mark a lot because I seriously have some kind of problem, and this month is no different. I have 24 books to talk to you guys about, so I'm going to go through these as quickly as possible, but I apologize in advance because this is going to be a long video. So let's just jump straight in and talk about the books. The first book I have to talk to you about is a book that I saw on Carol from the Reading Wallflowers ebook haul video, and that is Paper Princess by Erin Watt. I don't know too much about this except that it is a new adult romance story, I believe, and Carol compared it to Cruel Intentions, and Cruel Intentions is a movie that I totally love, so I definitely want to check this one out. The next book I have to talk about is one that I actually saw a picture on Twitter, and that is what first intrigued me about it, and that is Three Dark Crowns by Kendar Blake. And the picture that I saw had like a little kind of poem that I'll quickly read to you, and that is: Three dark queens are born in a glen, sweet little triplets will never be friends. Three dark sisters, all fair to be seen, two to devour and one to be queen. Does that not sound amazingly intriguing? I believe this follows three triplets who are all raised separately, and they all have a different like kind of magical ability, but only one of them can be queen, and in order to become queen they have to kill their other two sisters. It sounds amazing, and I definitely will be checking this one out when it comes out because it sounds totally awesome. The next book I have to talk about is My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. This is a book that was actually recommended to me on Goodreads by Mel from That Girl Bookworm. It is a book that I have seen on Booktube a little bit recently, and Mel recommended it to me because she knows that I enjoy books that deal with the topic of friendship, and so I don't know too much about what this is about except that it does deal with friendship, but I definitely want to read it because that is a topic that I really enjoy. The next book I want to talk about is I Will Find You by Joanna Connors. This is a non-fiction book that I actually saw in store, and I really liked the look of it, and so I picked it up, and it sounds really intriguing. It is a non-fiction story about a woman who was raped at knife point, and I don't think reported it to police, and she didn't do anything about it for like 21 years or something like that. And then, no, sorry, I think she may have. He was convicted for the crime, but she kind of just moved on with her life. And then 21 years later, well, as best you can move on with your life, and 21 years later, she makes it her mission, and she learns every single fact that she can about her rapist, about his life, everything about him, what made him a man who would rape a woman. And it just sounds really interesting. It'd probably be a hard book to read, but it definitely sounds like an interesting topic. The next book I marked as to read is Carve the Mark by Veronica Roth. Again, this is a book that I don't know too much about, but other than the fact that it is by Veronica Roth, who, as we all know, wrote the Divergent trilogy. Divergent, I loved. I gave 5 stars. I despised Allegiant. I hated the way the series ended, but I really see the potential in Veronica Roth's writing, obviously, by the fact that I really loved Divergent. This is, I believe, going to be a duology, and I really do want to check it out when it does come out. The next 3 books I'm going to talk about are all books that were mentioned in an article from BuzzFeed called The 41 Most Suspenseful Books You'll Ever Read. And the first of those is Descent by Tim Johnston. This is a book that I don't know too much about, except that it is supposed to be really suspenseful, obviously. And I believe it follows a family who go on some kind of hike or camping trip or something like that in the mountains, and their 2 children go off on like a hike or a walk or something like that, and only the son returns, the daughter goes missing. That's all I really know about it, but obviously it's supposed to be suspenseful, so I definitely want to check it out at some point in the future. Apologies if the camera angle just changed. I had a battery die as per usual. The next book from that BuzzFeed article is Playing with Fire by Tess Gerritsen, and I don't know too much about this one except it sounds really intriguing, as I believe it deals with a haunting piece of music, a piece of violin music, I think. So that sounds really interesting, and it is supposed to be suspenseful again, so I look forward to checking it out at some point. And the final book from that BuzzFeed article is In a Dark Wood by Ruth Ware. And this is a book that I've actually heard about before, and I believe it deals with a woman who is invited to this hen's night, and it's a bit strange that she's invited because it's someone that she went to high school with who she hasn't seen in 10 years, and she goes, and strange things happen or something like that. I don't know too much about it, but it sounds really, that synopsis just really, really intrigues me. And I've seen it in shops a couple of times, but every time I see it like at Dimmicks and I've picked it up, it's always like $37 or something, and that is ridiculously expensive. But when I saw it on that article and I realized I hadn't marked it as to read, I did that immediately because this is definitely a book that I want to get to. The next book I marked as to read is All the Ugly and Wonderful Things by Bryn Greenwood. This is a book that I actually just saw in the Goodreads recommendation section, and it sounds really interesting. It follows a girl who is the daughter of a meth dealer, and I believe she's basically raising her younger brother, and then an ex-con who's like a client of her father's wrecks his motorcycle in front of their house or something, and I believe it follows a very unusual romance. I'm not too sure based on that, like whether this is something I'll really like or something I'll really hate, but it sounds really intriguing, so I do want to check it out at some point. The next book I marked as to read is actually The Feminine Mystique by Betty Friedan. This is a book that is mentioned quite a lot in the introduction in The Awakening by Kate Chopin, which is a book that I read this month. And it's a well-known piece of feminist literature, basically. And of course, if you have seen 10 Things I Hate About You, then you know that this book is mentioned in that movie. And so when it was talked about a lot in that, I just thought this is a book that I should really check out because I think it'll just be a really interesting read. So I marked that one as to read this month. The next book I want to talk about is The Loney by Andrew Michael Hurley. This is a book that I've actually seen previously, but the reason I marked it as to read is because it actually just won the British Book of the Year, I believe, and I have no idea, like, the synopsis of this is so, I don't understand, like, what is this book about? I don't know, but it won British Book of the Year, and I am intrigued, so I probably will check it out at some point in the future. Who knows when, but hopefully I'll get to it at some point. The next book I marked as to read is Because You Love to Hate Me. I marked this as to read for very obvious reasons. This is the book that is going to be published by a bunch of authors with introductions by booktubers. Obviously, I marked this as to read. I can't wait till this comes out, even though it's so far away, but I will definitely be jumping on this as soon as it is released. The next book I want to talk about is Blackmore by Julianne Donaldson. This is a book that I actually saw Reagan from Peruse Project talking about in her April wrap-up. It's a book that she really enjoyed, and from what I understand, it's basically a historical romance, but I think it has a little bit more meat to it than that. I believe it's about a girl who doesn't want to get married, and I think she wants to travel to India or something like that, and her mother says to her that she won't have to get married if she can first secure 3 marriage proposals and then reject them. So it sounds really interesting. Reagan had really good things to say about it, and I definitely want to check it out. The next book I marked as to read is a book that I've heard a lot about on BookTube, and I realized this month that I'd never marked it as to read, and that is Tigerlily by Jodie Lynn Anderson. This is a Peter Pan retelling told from the point of view of Tinkerbell. That's all I really know about it. That's enough. I've been wanting to read this for ages, and I just realized I'd never marked it as to read, so I rectified that situation this month. The next book I want to talk about is Codename Verity by Elizabeth Fine. This is a book, again, that I obviously have heard a lot about over the years, and I really do want to read it, and I realized I'd never marked it as to read. It also came up in a lot of people's friendship recommendation videos this month, so I definitely, this is a book I really, really want to read, and hopefully I can get to soon. The next book I want to talk about is Winter's Bride by Nellie C. Lind. This is one that I actually saw a picture of the cover on Instagram, and I just really liked the cover, and so I had a look into what it was about, and it sounds really interesting. It's set in a world where there are 2 kings and 2 queens, each to do with the seasons, and she gets put into jail for like a minor thing, and the Winter Lord comes to see her and ask her to marry him, and she ends up marrying him, I think, and then there's like, he's got like secrets and everything's not as it seems. It just sounds like quite interesting, and I really do love the cover. The next 2 books I have to talk about are both books that I saw in CC from Problems of a Book Nerd's May TBR video. The first of those is Of Fire and Stars by Audrey Colthurst. This is a book that I believe is set in a fantasy world, and it follows a princess who has been betrothed all her life to a prince, and when she gets old enough, I think, and she travels to go marry him, and she gets there and she falls in love with his sister. So it's obviously an LGBTQIA plus novel, and it sounds really, really interesting, and I definitely want to check it out. And the other book that Cece mentioned in her TBR is Burning by Danielle Rollins, which is actually a pen name for Danielle Vega. And this is, I believe, just a YA horror story set in a mental asylum. That's all I know. That's all I need to know. The next book I marked as to read is The Butcher's Hook by Janet Ellis. This is a book that I actually saw Kristen from Vienna Waits Books talking about in her April wrap-up. And again, it is a historical fiction with, I believe, some romantic kind of themes. She had really good things to say about it. She made it sound really interesting. I don't know too much about it, but I do definitely want to check it out at some point in the future. The next book I marked as to read is actually one that is the first book in a series, and a friend of my sister's has been reading it, and my sister mentioned to me that this friend of hers keeps mentioning that this is the best book series that she's ever read, and it is so much better than The Hunger Games, and that she can't believe people haven't read it. That book is Arena 1 Slave Runners by Morgan Rice. That's the first book, so I marked it as to read because anyone who claims that a book is better than The Hunger Games, like, that's a book I have to check out. It does sound very similar to The Hunger Games based on the synopsis, but I definitely want to check it out at some point and see if I agree with her opinion. The next book I want to talk about is The Darkest Lie by Pintip Dunn. This is a book that I actually saw going in a Twitter giveaway, and it sounds really interesting. It follows a girl who was really, really close with her mother, like she thought they shared everything, and then her mother commits suicide in the wake of allegations of her mother having sex with a student. And she's kind of dealing with that and the aftermath when she starts her senior year, and she ends up counseling at the same kind of like teen hotline or something like that her mother worked at. It just sounds really, really interesting, and it sounds like something that will be a really interesting read. The next book I want to talk about is Nocti by Courtney Cole. This is a book that I actually saw Grace from Grace with a Book in Her Face talking about in her Books with Plot Twists video, and she, obviously it has a plot twist. She had really, really good things to say about it. This is a book that I'd never heard of before. It sounds really interesting. It follows two twins, a girl and a boy, I believe, who are really, really close, and the only thing like kind of keeping her brother alive or something is her. I don't really know, to be honest, but it sounds really interesting, and obviously at some point it must have a great plot twist, so I definitely want to check it out at some point in the future. The next book I want to talk about is Conjured by Sarah Beth Durst. This is a book that someone actually mentioned in the comments of that video by Grace about books with plot twists. They said this was a really great book, and it looks really interesting. It follows a girl who it's some kind of fantasy-ish or urban fantasy world, I'm not sure, because there's magic, but she is in a witness protection program of some sort, and she can't remember like details and of something, some big thing that happened, but everyone really wants her to remember because they need these details from her. That's all I really know. It sounds really interesting. This person had good things to say about it in the comments, so I definitely want to check that one out. And the final book that I marked as to read in the month of May is Wild Swans by Jessica Spotswood. This is a book that I've just seen going around, mentioned on BookTube quite a bit, and I think I actually saw that Aoife from Fred Breesley Died Laughing recently gave this 5 stars, so that's another reason why I would definitely want to check this one out. I don't know too much about exactly what it's about. I just believe it deals with a girl whose family kind of has a history of the women dying young or something like that, and then this girl's mother, who ran out on her when she was a young child, returns, and she brings with her 2 other like daughters that she's had or something like that. I don't know too much about it, but it does sound really interesting, and as I said, I've just heard a lot about it on BookTube recently, and some real positive things, so I definitely want to check it out. So that is the ridiculous amount of books that I marked as to read in the month of May, because I don't know, guys, I like seriously have some kind of problem. Like every month I'm like, oh, I've been marking so many books as to read, like this month it'll be a lot less, and it's not. Every month it's ridiculous. I don't know why. I'm sorry I didn't give great synopses of some of these books, but as per usual, I will link all of the books' Goodreads pages down below, as well as a link to all of the booktubers that I mentioned in this video. I would love to chat to you guys in the comments down below if you have any thoughts about any of these books, if you've read any of them, or any books that you're really excited about that you really want to get to, that you've been hearing about recently. I would love to chat to you guys in the comments down below. Please like this video if you liked it. Please subscribe if you want to see more. But that's all I've got for this video today. Bye, guys.